everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you here. And I just passed out an evaluation form. In spite of the fact that it has the word draft on it, it's not a draft. Does anyone need a copy of it? Well, I'm very happy to see you all here this morning, and I'm particularly happy to welcome Haythornthwaite as our first speaker in the Deans Colloquium Series. Caroline is director and professor at the School of Library, Archival,
to any town is that my luggage is somewhere between Miami and Tallahassee, and I find it a little warm here, so that's it. So thank you for inviting me to come and to speak with you. This is a wonderful opportunity to talk with people who are engaged in the development of iSchools, and it's really just such an exciting field that I love to talk about it, even if my mind goes crazy with all the things you have to juggle. So if I could do a juggling act here, it wouldn't just be 3, it would be about 10 or 20 or 30 balls up in the air, which I'm sure you all know about. So what I'm going to focus on today is this changing landscape of information science and technology, and really the opportunities and challenges. There's no answer to this question, and I'm very much going to emphasize as I go through that it's a process of figuring out what identity you want in this space. It's right now, it's very open, and I think all of the information schools are challenged to create their own identity within a large landscape, facing a lot of the kind of challenges that we know are there. But I want to first follow a tradition that I've acquired since my time at the University of British Columbia, and it's first to acknowledge that we're on the ancestral land of the Seminole tribe of Florida. As described online, the Tribal Council's resolution reads in part that the Seminole tribe of Florida has an established relationship with Florida State University, which includes permission to use the word Seminole, as well as various Seminole symbols and images, etc. So this is important to do in these environments. The recognition of the indigenous people is a new tradition for me, starting from UBC, one that stems of my time there in recognition of, not that machine, this one. University of British Columbia sits on the unceded land of the Musqueam people, and it's a really quite a pervasive part of the culture there to understand this co-construction of this new 21st century relationship with the Musqueam at UBC and also with the nations in Canada. So it's important and relevant for today's talk because attention to the representations, to the way we value and privilege certain ways of knowing, and the integration of traditional practices into institutional and technical systems is and should be what we are doing in this field. And it's important because of the models, approaches, and services our field can provide. So what I want to do now is then invite you to an era where we build airplanes in the air. I couldn't believe they got a Harrier jet into the Tate Britain in the UK. And so that's a Harrier jet hanging up there. So this is a phrase from my former colleague Chip Bruce, who used it to describe the process he experienced
as a member of a research group called the Inquiry Group. And it elegantly captures what we feel and know is in the state of LIS and IT research and practice and education in the 21st century. To me, it was about creating from the ground what it is that was being done, but also having to fly at the same time. Now, I think in our field, we might say that we were actually refitting and completely redoing an airplane in the air, because we had a framework, and now we're having to change all the pieces out and make it a completely different shape. So it's not the blind leading the blind here. It's an active co-construction of identity, purpose, and direction. And it's a process that, as I say, is familiar to all of us. So, as I say, to outline some ideas about the process and the direction in this search for a renewed identity. But in keeping with Chip Bruce's meaning here, this is not a top-down view. It's very much bottom-up, a collective direction of participants. And as he said, a bottom-up approach reflects a community of practice. As a result, questions about when it begins or ends, where it reaches its goals, makes less sense, and a revised set of questions then arises. And I think we are very challenged now to ask different questions. Edward de Bono years ago, innovative thinking, don't dig the same hole deeper, dig somewhere else. And I think that's what we're being asked to do these days too. So some of the kind of questions is what does the community value? How does it evolve? How do members facilitate interaction, communication, co-development? Okay, well, here's the simplified view of our field. Data, information, and knowledge. And we were just, a number of us were at the iConference, and the first keynote speaker got this mixed up. So he wasn't in our field, I agree, but he was saying information, data, knowledge, and wisdom. And he was constantly trying to fit through a backwards data and information. It was kind of painful. But the future, as I say, is in these interconnections. That's where I see it. It's not just data. We're all challenged by the idea of big data. But it's not data by itself. It's what the heck are we going to do with it? How are we going to make it useful and turn it into some kind of something we can use and move forward with? So let's look at a bit of an enhanced view. It's not that much difference, but we want to think of data as defined from knowledge. And I really want to get the cycle idea in here, that data is defined from the knowledge that we collect. It's analyzed and interpreted as information. Information is collected and curated, made accessible, translated, et cetera. So we've got the data goes into the information, but knowledge also affects who we talk to, what we think is important to talk about, as I said, about what the ways of knowing, what values we attribute to certain kinds of information resources, trails, et cetera. And then knowledge, which is derived from information, but very much structured by history. It's gained through experience, but it's verified back through data. We hope it's verified through data. We want to come back around. So again, the intersections, we have a whole system, not just interconnected, but iterative, constantly going around. And again, this is the kind of thread that I think is something that we need to address more in seeing how to become an iSchool with an iStream, a flow of data, information, and knowledge. So not everybody knows who I am in the room, although there's an awful lot of people who do. Some of them know secrets. We're going to muzzle them. So how did I get here? So I'm daring enough to call myself an information scientist at this point. I start off with the research end, and surprisingly, I start off with degrees in experimental psychology. I then worked in computing for about 10 years, and the economy did its usual. And I went looking to get a qualification that let people know that I could do what I was doing, and that turned out to be a Master's of Information Studies. And so from there, I always say I got seduced by research, and I stayed on to do the doctorate, which focusing on social networks, good heavens, the beginning internet. In fact, I'm not even sure it had really begun. Barely begun internet. And it doesn't mean I'm old, it means I'm very young. But The internet was invented yesterday. So a lot of stuff on internet research, and at the time we were doing a lot of saying, can you have community through online? Can you have any real relationships online? Now, I had been working at that point in a company that had email, one of the first email systems, and we had been working online with the email. I had worked with distributed teams. I was managing teams that were in France, Toronto, Buffalo, and Victoria in British Columbia. We were already in the 80s dealing with time zone differences, with collaboration through text online, with document sharing and code sharing. That which seems so new today, we're doing a long time ago. So in that sense, I already knew you could swim in that water. And so when I got out into the university and found that people didn't think that was the case, you kind of go, oh dear, what's wrong? So the same thing then, moving on to the idea of e-learning. I had been researching there. I thought I was researching online community, but I was doing it in an online learning setting. And I got an invitation to work on the handbook of e-learning research. And I said, oh, maybe I am doing e-learning research. So I kind of turned my focus to look there. And that has actually made me look a lot more at learning and how we learn online, how we learn altogether and how we learn online. So the area. So on the side, teaching and mentoring, I've taught at the various levels, but particularly in the online. That's my emphasis in the e-learning. At Illinois, we were teaching a fair bit online. But one of the things that have been important over the years is the interdisciplinarity, to try and bring things from different kinds of fields and bring them together. And these days, I've been doing more in the junior faculty mentoring. So end up here, now I'm director at the iSchool at UBC, and well, I think I've given you some more of those things before. Also managed the undergraduate information technology minor when at Illinois. So I went over some of these. I won't go through this again, but just basically online social networks, again, the relational basis of ties. And the one thing this let us do, it was take apart that which is locked into a face-to-face interaction. I'm preaching to the choir here because you're doing the online learning. You know it's possible. But it was the research view that said you can separate these things. You can break them down into pieces and find out which ones still matter in a new environment, which ones you have to work on, and which ones are natural. So the natural idea of being able to see your faces in it right now versus not having that potential online has led in the e-learning research to looking at this, how do you visualize the social networks of people online as they're teaching. So we haven't got it yet, but we have, with the Society for Learning Analytics Research, we have plans for that kind of dashboard that would show what's going on. We need some big money for that, but we're trying. And distributed knowledge, also understanding how people put knowledge together. So that is, how do you work together online, but it was also understanding how people are stuck in their institutional ideas, their disciplinary ideas. And I called it articulating divides. How do you get a group to understand what they think they're doing and then articulate that so that they're not going like this when they're having a conversation? Something, again, that's fairly familiar for the rest of us in information science. Well, at this point, you may see a little bit of my background predisposes me to ideas of teams, collaboration, distributed work, co-construction of knowledge. I've worked in software development teams, researched these distributed teams, written and proposed theories about how people work and create knowledge together at a distance and through computer media. And of course, always fascinated by networks. And along the way, I've swallowed hook, line, and sinker the veracity of online relationships and communities. I believe very much in the value of e-learning. And about e-learning, one of the things that, we say, oh, it's not as good as face-to-face. Well, that's the wrong question. Is it as good as? It's the wrong question. What if it's the only way you can do it? How are you going to do it best? So let's, move the discussion to a different set of questions. I'm also a great proponent of the power of participatory culture. For considerations as diverse as serious leisure, knowledge construction, e-democracy, globalization. really fascinating changes in the crowds and the crowdsourcing of information. And I will go on a limb and say I don't think there's many iSchools that are really going hook, line, and sinker into looking at that crowdsourcing of information. Schools, I mean, there are individuals, of course. And in this, I also adhere to a lot of philosophies that start with the word social shaping. We can go down the list: co-creation, adaptive structuration, continuous emergence, reciprocal co-evolution, mutual influence, and mutual shaping, all around the idea of the social and the technical. And if we go back to my earlier diagram, it's around the data, information, and knowledge, because these are also each individually around the social and technical. So one thing I want to say, when I talk about the word technology, I tend to use that word in the management sense of accomplishing work. So it's not this or this or this. This is the way I accomplish my communication. It's how I accomplish work. So just keep that definition in mind when I use the word technology. So to return what I said earlier, I think we do best for our field when we address process. And I believe that we're best able to do that when we take these kind of three mindsets: a critical mindset that questions what we're doing, why we're doing it, why we're still doing it the same way, or whether the new way we're doing it is the best way we can do it. I believe very much in a research mindset. This is, again, the idea of asking questions, but also asking them in a way that makes them amenable to empirical validation and the full cycle evaluation, and then back into design, the third element. I think there's a fair bit of a movement in some of the iSchools towards the concept of design, meaning that it isn't just the evaluation as perhaps in a sociological perspective to say what's going on out there, but also taking what you're doing and feeding that back into the design of something, some technology, social, technical, physical, that lets you do things better the next time around. So am I going to take this directly to FSU? No, I'm going to give you a more general, and we can talk about more local potential applications when we get to questions. So let's go back. Oh, well, but I seem to have a slide here that says a quick view of what you look like from the outside. So as I say, one of the things that I'm very keen on is not telling people what they ought to be doing with their iSchool, but instead emphasizing the process comes from what people see. And this is just the website view. I can't learn anything from the website about the ideas that you haven't articulated yet, the ideas that you're just thinking about, I wish I could put these three things together. So really, and in a sense, we're looking at, this is the archaeology of your research, because this is what you have funded, have made up to the point of institutions. But you can see a very strong, both information management and STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and medicine orientation with the institutions, different kinds of formats and technologies, instruction, of course. You get a lot of collaboration. I wonder where that comes from. And outreach to communities, and also towards the social goods of education, health, and infrastructure. Anyway, we can come back to more to FSU forward. So moving forward. Okay, so we already know that it's an airplane that we have to construct, co-construct, reconstruct in the air. And I believe it happens best through three aspects. And I've talked a little bit about the mindsets. And this is to do with, somebody want me to get an airplane? Is that my luggage calling me? I know I was supposed to turn these off. It's none of you. Okay. It'll go away, I promise. And I've talked a little bit about the intersections and interactions of data, information, and knowledge. Come on. That's it. It's gone. Oh. Excuse me. Oh, yes. Okay. Well, what we're going to do here is actually try and just put that on mute. Technologies who want to join the conversation. What did we talk about? Communication technologies? Okay. And I have, you always have to I'll start talking about devices. I have very cold fingers, and I have a problem actually working these devices when they have heat, if they need any kind of heat. So this is where some improvement in technology is needed, some design for those of us whose fingers don't work right. Okay, well, I'm trying to get to the capitalizing on the fast and slow, which was the title of the paper, Information Fast and Slow. So let me try and get into that one. And in that, as we go through it, I think there's capitalizing on this, which is the sort of the brand new things, but also blending the old and the new, because I don't believe in throwing everything out. So what is this information fast and slow? Well, on the fast side, we're talking about the ideas in the design phase of prototyping. Prototype, produce, disseminate. It's not the old idea of you define all the specifications and then you create the system and then you test it and evaluate it and you implement it. This is way too slow for today's world. We have to design, promote, innovate, get it in there, check it out. So that means a whole different way of working with information technology in the technology development aspect. And some of those designs, learning better design techniques, and we all know that in the systems development lifecycle, the earlier you do it, the better. If you get it right in design before you start implementing. So it's a shift in where you're putting the infrastructure, shifting it back and earlier, but also not investing a lot in getting these, because another 6 months there'll be something else. So you might have got good at blogs, and then Twitter comes along, you'll get good at Facebook, and then, so also in that is sticking to the principles of what it is we're trying to do there, and we're trying to communicate. So what are the various ways? So test and practice and reiterate in production. This skips the formal assessment. Wouldn't it be nice if we were allowed to do that in our curricula? We'll just keep changing it until for each year, because we know that. We do that with our courses. On the other side, the equally important, I must say this is equally important, the long-term analysis, theorizing, comparing, researching the impact, and developing policy. So policy, to me, should be long, slow. Your latest application, your latest app should be quick, fast. So classically, you might say it's online versus offline, the blog versus the monograph, the tweet versus the letter. I was trying to get a good one for that. You can tell me what's a good parallel to the tweet. I thought maybe the written letter. The breaking news journalism is catching up to the fact that the world has changed. And I don't know the journalism here, but other places, journalism has just discovered the internet. Okay. And perhaps that's from our field. We haven't been out there telling them about how the world is changing, but they're suddenly reinventing the internet. It's very fascinating. But the difference between breaking news and historical analyses, innovation versus legacy and heritage, scientific breakthroughs versus proven technologies, my favorite, crowds and communities, and also this wonderful world, agile. And I said the agile systems that can do this versus the secure production systems. Now, if you got talking about my money in my bank, oh, wait a minute, banks aren't safe anyway, but I would rather the bank had good security and had spent a lot of time thinking about it and implemented it correctly. But if I have an app for a phone, if it breaks, it doesn't work. If the angry birds are semi-nice birds one day, So, and in here, again, the fast and slow. Data is our fast stuff now, and knowledge is the slow. And if we're running down that dotted line in the middle. So I picked up some of the idea of the fast and slow from a journalist who says we binge on instant knowledge. He was actually talking about somebody who was doing a walking tour of the world. It's really quite interesting. It's a 7-year walking tour of the world. He's going to write about it as he goes. But he says we binge on instant knowledge that we're learning, but we are learning the hazards, and readers, or shall we say also students, learners, et cetera, are warier than they used to be of nanosecond interpretations. And here are the examples of Supreme Court decisions. The economics of the business have not suddenly improved, but in the midst of all the opining with authority and speed, it's nice to be reminded that the alternative doesn't make you a Luddite. And I think this last one is the one that we're afraid of. that if we stick to knowledge and slow knowledge, and we still value the 3-year researched, well, 3-year, 5-year researched history, that will be taken as a Luddite. Now, of course, the irony here is that this was a blog post. So here's an argument for slow journalism made on the latest fast journalism platform. So fast and slow again. So one thing that we find about the fast is that it's fragile, it's friable, it's emergent. And a nice little phrase from Vint Cerf at a recent conference: etched in silicon has a certain fragility versus etched in stone. And I don't know if you can see that, but this is the Museum of London, and they have a printing press, and then all these screens showing electronic versions above. And the slow, it's stable, it's slow to change, and it is institutional. And here I'm showing the British Library with the British Museum with the original library inside, blending of the old and the new. Some of the things that we're dealing with here are fast knowledge and slow infrastructures, I would say. So this is the Wiki Express, from which the term Wikipedia comes. So we're talking about this fast acquisition of it's distributed, participatory, connected, this fast, rapid creation of knowledge. And really, I mean, something like Wikipedia is a knowledge repository. It's a creation of knowledge, and it's also a creation of knowledge because of the discussion that goes on there. Because it's not just data going in there. It's a communication and an interpretation and a validation of particular ways of looking at things. So Wikipedia is while fast, is still knowledge. It's not just data. But the infrastructures are slow in the sense that, yes, Wikipedia is fast, but we've already lost the physical encyclopedias because they're not fast enough. So those infrastructures of print have been changing, and of encyclopedia as something that can persist is slow. We've been slow to change those things. We have, again, the fast creation of data, continuous. When you automate, you informate. Zuboff was right then, she's still right. And we are informating like mad these days. But it takes a long time for that kind of being able to capture the speed of the trains, to create it into a system that can tell you when your train's coming and actually make it a useful. So it's slow creation, and then as far as fast creation of data, and that slow time to figure out how to do it and get it up there and right. So there's, as I say, these proliferation of data streams, information streams. They can be, they're dynamic. They go from little tiny ones to huge ones. They are tied to geography. Something that was also not that covered a lot is the tie to geography. There's more now that GIS systems, geographic information systems, are not brought that much into information science curricula. We have to do it now. I mean, the information that's coming out of putting the GIS with mapping, and to understand how communities are working and how the information is flowing is very, very interesting changes. Along with that, then going on to the analytics, I mean, we're creating the data. We now need to create the analytic techniques. We need to take that massive quantity of data and create new visualizations. We need quick ways into it. At the moment, we have slow ways into the data. It's coming more and more. But one thing that I always caution about visualizations is we don't really know what is happening in that behind the scenes in that visualization. Herbert Simon, I think, is the one who put the phrase that from about 1970s, 80s, that with computers, the algorithms are disappearing into machines. So a programmer creates the algorithm, does the data analysis, it goes into machine, nobody ever looks at it again. It goes into code. And I think we are poised to make the same mistake with visualizations. So we have to understand what it is we're visualizing, particularly when we're taking 3, 4, 5-dimensional problems and we're sticking them down on 2 dimensions. Maybe 3 if you work well, but to try and understand and visualize 5, 6, 7 dimensions is not really something that we can do intuitively. Therefore, we're depending on surrogates for that. But I think it's a very important, it's getting to be the new important way to take data and into an information stream that you can use. Blending the old and new again. I mean, what is the future and meaning of these traditional cultural heritage institutions in the digital age? Are they a good model? Do we follow that? Do we abandon them? This is a library in China, by the way. My husband was visiting, so he took some incredible pictures of these huge, vast physical spaces. It's funny, it ended up looking a bit like a circuit board. So it's, again, fast production, and we want to be a little slower on preservation. We want to spend a little time figuring out how to preserve, what to select. And at the moment, because we don't have automated ways of preservation, we're going to have to choose, based on our knowledge, what we think is going to be important to preserve first, because we can't do it all. So we're also at that stage where we're likely to lose a lot of information, and on the other hand, we may be happy to forget it because it's too much. Perhaps there's some that we do need to not keep. I put David Lanke's his expect more. Now that's very much about the way the libraries are working as they tie to communities. So, you know, if your library is only doing X, you know, if only supplying with the regular way of doing business, books, and expect more connection across other libraries, expect more innovative programming, expect more outreach to the community, etc. So I think as far as the institutions go, I think it's a good phrase without diminishing in any way the difficulties of doing that. And I think the other thing that we're dealing with a lot is problems of equivocality. Pero talks about problems of uncertainty and problems of equivocality. A problem of uncertainty is all to do with the inputs and their variations. So, but there are rules for problems of uncertainty. So engineering, it may be very, very difficult. There are a lot of rules, but you know them, and quote unquote, all you have to do is get the information. Problems of equivocality have to be negotiated. You have to negotiate the question you're going to ask. And really that's what we're doing as an iSchools, and the identity is figuring out what question we want to ask and negotiating what question we want to ask in order that we can then go out and collect the information. So this is graffiti. So, and it's on a wall in London, right down near the Queen Elizabeth Hall for music. Is it art, entertainment, public service? Because it's a sanctioned space. Is it an eyesore? Is it delinquent behavior? Is it a model for entrepreneurship? Good question. But the question is, how do we decide? We have to figure out what it means. Are we going to embrace new forms of expression, or are we going to exclude them? And how do we decide which ones are going to be part of our game? So it's all process. Here's another graffiti. This was in a little park in children's play area in Rio. I think it's the most beautiful flower I've ever seen. And then up to now, I've just been talking about our intellectual level, you know, this room. But you've got a whole generation coming in with brand new practices, coming in and saying, well, yeah, of course you prototype and you never worry about things being finished. Of course you spend all your day communicating online. It's basic. So what is it that we're doing in making the next generation literate in bringing our education to the undergraduates to find out how to bridge their ways of knowing and our ways of knowing. So design literacies is an idea from Sheridan and Roswell here, and they say it focuses on 4 dispositions that were common. They interviewed a lot of designers. So there were four dispositions, as they call it. Redesigning available materials from across many knowledge domains into innovative and responsive ways. Hey, that sounds like something we should do. Being creative, often when working in new participation structures and in ways elders could not have imagined in years past. These are creators in the field telling you that. communicating ideas persuasively to a variety of people, and materializing an idea through multiple modes elders have not historically privileged. Now, well, I might object to the word elders in there because I think they're, it's a bit ageism. It is this idea that there's a different way of working in the newer, innovative design space. And I think we all need to become more literate with these ideas. And here's the biggest problem, is making visible the knowledge base of information studies. It's a slide that speaks for itself. You may know the idea of invisible work. That's all the work you do that's not on your job description, that's not on anybody's evaluation forms, that's hidden and usually unrewarded, as in the sense of it's not getting status. But this is very important. And articulating the invisible work is also is our challenge, is letting people know that, hey, there's a whole system behind how a library functions. There's a whole system behind electronic resources. There's a whole system behind things. We need to make our invisible work visible. And, I keep on doing that. So, if the way forward then entails inquiry, this is the asking questions, intersections between our data, information, and knowledge, blending of the old and new, what are the possibilities? And here's where I just dumped everything. And I'm trying to type it on this machine, on an airplane, and it's getting small. So if there's typos in there, it's because I just couldn't see. So it's one of these things where it would have been shorter, but I didn't have enough time. So what are some of the ways forward? I mean, one of the things that I see is this connection through what I might call a data life course, except data is the wrong word. Domain specified. If we think of perhaps the data science or information science as the undergraduate practice, then when at the graduate level, you want to marry that with a field so that you can go out there and understand the analysis in a particular context, the visualization of data for communication purposes to a particular audience in a certain area. So if we take them, I mean, health informatics, hugely growing field. But on top of there's another one that's population level, and this is the public health level. So here we come back into the geolocation and the GIS. You say, okay, please put the restaurants and their health, their health inspection data up for me, please. And put those together and see what you've got. And in population health, they're also very interested in being able to change behaviors as well. What behaviors are happening at a population level that indicate problems that are going to tax the health resources. And they're very closely tied, the health informatics and the population health. Just different aspects of the kind of analytics that you need to address them. I don't know if social media is a domain, but right now there's an awful lot of work that can be done connecting, again, perhaps the word should be communication, collecting the kind of information, understanding the data that you can collect from social media, understanding how to analyze it, apply it in certain areas, manage it, monitor it, et cetera. So there's an awful lot of, in marketing, they're scraping the tweets all the time. And it's being used, so there's a big field in being able to use that information. Connecting to, when I said about population health, e-government, again, connecting you. Well, you sit right in a government town here. What data is Florida producing that you can then put together with a GIS system to put together to make towards a policy? So we're going from the fast again, the open data, to the slow. Media, same kind of end-to-end, STEM. Cultural heritage, I see a real synergy among the libraries, archives, and museums. And I don't know if I put it up there, but owner-operated. One thing I've found in recent times is we keep meeting people who don't need to go just to find out about a library. they're going to be the person that manages the library, archive, and museum that is their home institution. So they need to know how to manage the museum part, as well as the archive part, as well as the library part. The separation of these in different institutions is a big city model, but they're out in very small places, particularly up and down, and particularly actually in the First Nations, and because they've got everything together. So that's that I think is a way to go forward. Learning, we can go from peer production to analytics. I think I talked about that. So the information sciences, I do believe there's a core. The thing is that I think it's the same way we need to be agile on what that core is. I can't spend time telling you what the core is because it's changing and it should be an amorphous field. So I'm not going to even try. But here I noticed some work on shall we call it collective science? The science of socio-technical systems, teams, collaboration, negotiation, participatory culture, crowdsourcing. Always name your field, claim it. And there's a lot of data management science and archives, which is part of this area. Design, I put it out separately because I think there's some opportunities to cross the virtual and the physical. We're talking now about maker spaces and fab labs. So beyond HCI, we're actually saying get your hands on a 3D printer and make something. What happens if you actually make things in an environment? STEM, my big thing in STEM, of course, is women and girls in STEM. Is probably other underrepresented populations as well. But if we're going to look at STEM, let's look at women and girls in STEM. And I heard this new term at the iConference, STEAM, S-T-A-M, where A is the arts. And it made me wonder whether that is the entree for the the hook to get people into STEM, to grab the arts. It's also a very important way forward. I mean, yes, some of it is quite out there art, but a lot of it is bridging over in that visualization aspect as well. So, well, I'm probably running on long enough on this, and we can come back to this, but I mean, this is really just, there are so many ideas for the way forward that I want you to see, you get down to the small print on that. So what do? We have to enact the change too, and I think what I notice is anticipating the change. You don't want to be reactive, you want to be proactive. But very important is to distinguish fundamental change from trivial change. So to me, it's a trivial change to go from email to Twitter, except that it's a fundamental change when you move from private information to public information. So there's a fundamental change in communication patterns in there, but the change from one serial presentation of messages to another serial presentation of messages is potentially only a trivial change. So the question is finding out what it is. It's not just a change of medium that matters, it's something else that's going on. I think we can develop relationships with more partners, but also I think at the same time we have to do that every time. I don't think we should be service units. That we'll go and show science how to organize their information. We'll go and tell somebody else, because you'd be invisible again. So keeping some kind of core and engaging with those existing stakeholders. Creating the identity and, continue to enhance that visibility. Well, there's a lot of words on here. I tend to break all the rules on PowerPoints and put this up. It's partly because of giving presentations in other countries, then people who are not so good in English can read this at the same time, but so not 7 plus or minus 2 points. But let's just read this here. Everything that we've been saying about being more flexible, I think that has to come into the education. And Thomas Friedman wrote recently in a blog, I'm reading a few of them, in response to an earlier comment that all you have to do is work hard and play by the rules to succeed. He says, the truth is, if you want a decent job that will lead to a decent life today, you have to work harder, regularly reinvent yourself, obtain at least some form of post-secondary education, make sure that you're engaged in lifelong learning, and then play by the rules. I don't know what the rules are, but yep. But it's more than, you have to do something new, you have to reinvent, so that's what we have to teach. We have to make sure that people who come through our programs are able to face those kinds of challenges. Well, let's see. I think I have one. I've said, I think already, I just have one or two slides here. Valuing questions, really put value into asking questions. This is back to the research perspective on things, and make it pervasive all the way through the education. And last but not least, certainly maintain a sense of humor. Because, you know, outside of a dog, a book is a man's best friend, but inside of a dog, it's too dark to read. And that's my puppy. Although he lives in Chicago, he's reading The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night. And I did not pose him. He just took to it. And so I will end at this point to always maintain a sense of proportion in this. So I will pass it to you now for questions. And silence again. Okay.
So 10 years or so ago, I remember it was still very common for people to come to our school and say, hey, can you help us build this digital collection? Can you help us digitize? Can you scan stuff for us? I did some stuff at the Wing Museum about it. You know, I can remember Jane Robinson with Dean that was like, oh God, not another one. Right? But over the past few years, I think we've seen sort of a shift away from can you build this thing for us to, hey, we built this thing and nobody's using it. Can you give us some tips as to what we can do to engage our audiences with this thing that we're doing? And this is where I say, aha, now you caught up.
Now you got it.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's a problem I think all the high schools face. How do we help people make this transition from thinking us as, oh, they can help us build a database, you know, to they can help us engage a community that is co-constructive, participatory around the resources that we have. How do we manage that transition?
I was going to say, you've got them coming to think you can do. You've got them thinking you can do a database. You're ahead of some of the others. Well, this is a good question, and I think it's why we're not a computer science school, and why we're not a management information. We're not data management schools. We are schools that understand the social and the technical. So internally, it takes a while for the graduates to get out to be proved to be doing what, you know, so the graduates are going out there now with this kind of knowledge. They're beginning to get into the workforce with that kind of idea that they can say about more than just how to put a program together. And I think most people have examples of how employers say, oh yeah, well they know how to do more than that. It's why people want the master's degree on top of other things as well, because it gives people something more than just skills in a sense. It gives them more domain. But you're talking about how do you get the outside world to see that. I think it's uphill, because I think being able to understand the socio-technical mix, it's still a hard sell. I'm part of a research collaboration network on socio-technical perspectives, and it took round after round of NSF to get that. I think we got it they got it on the third round. So, but that's what you need to do. You need to get to the point where it's getting up to the visibility, and getting to accept that it's not just the technology. But I mean, the world's going to be a little slower than that. So what we need is a popular press book. You know, we really do need to be out there saying things other than among ourselves in the academic area. And I know that's funny. We need a popular press book, but how, you know, it's funny. I just read a children's book, young adult book, that explains pretty much our field. Explains about data privacy and monitoring, and so once it's in there, it's coming into the next generation. I'm scraping my head to remember the name of it. It'll come to me in about half an hour from now when everybody's gone. But I think it's seeping into the popular. But we need it in that kind of way. We need it. Malcolm Gladwell does a great job of selling what we do, and we could do a bit more of that. I think there's also if you have consulting relationships with businesses, then I think there's a need to talk to the employers. Ideas of having employer, not advisories, but an association with employers, potential employers, so that they join to be part of a consultation. You come, you tell them about what you're doing, but they also tell you about what they're doing in their workplaces, and you get a connection between them. I think that's a very important thing to do locally. It doesn't sort of help you nationally, but it certainly would help locally to have that kind of think tank. I'm not sure what to call it, but I know a couple models of that. I mean, they were doing it in Illinois before we left, and in another unit that we're connected with at UBC, they're also doing that. So we're offering something for businesses, entrepreneurs to come in and learn about what we're doing, but in a way that is not at the high intellectual level, but I've got a work problem, what do I do with it? So usually they were trying to talk about how to start their communities of practice. So they wanted to know how to get their communities of practice working. And that was really then also about how do you get people to talk together, share their data, pool their resources, et cetera. So uphill, but I think there are ways into it as well. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, Chuck.
One of the areas that I enjoyed talking about was some of the monumental shifts that have occurred in a relatively short period of time in terms of information access management.
Yep.
Some of the work we've been doing in the privacy area is a real interesting dichotomy. Folks who are about 40 or 45 and older, their views on privacy information and what should be made available,
Yep.
versus folks, say, 30 and younger, are not night and day, they're tectonic changes.
Right.
And so we've been working with some of the federal folks about how do you do privacy protection from a policy perspective.
Yeah.
In this environment, and it's very difficult, okay, because you're dealing with old white men in Congress that don't have a clue about some of this stuff. So I come back to some of your issues that you talk about, and I'm interested in your perspective on more of a policy perspective, in the sense of some of these things. I can make the argument we don't have our own heads to create. Okay, we have other people. Whether it's our Board of Regents or whether it's our incredible governor or other people.
Do I detect a little cynicism in there?
It's way beyond cynicism.
Oh, okay.
Please don't leave thinking I'm cynical, please. Which suggests to us that we don't have our own heads to create the way in which we want others to perceive us.
Right.
Is that
So,
making any sense?
yeah.
Okay.
So
So,
you have proxies who do the talking for you, or you.
Or worse.
Yes, you don't have.
To have deans and other people
Yeah.
who go out and tell somebody else
What
it
you're-
is you do, and
that's
you
right.
wake up in the morning and say, well, shit, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm interested in
Yeah.
how you rationalize this. We can create our own world with a bunch of idiot politicians and other people. I certainly wouldn't include deans in that. Other deans, Larry. Not this dean, other deans. Because there's a real conflict there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's called reality therapy.
Yeah. The reality principle. Yeah. Well, I think I want to start just a little bit back on your first point about people being at a different stages, and I think there's a fallacy that everybody can do one thing, that everybody's ready for everything right now. So I think some of it's finding the entree, and particularly in the e-learning area, and of course the flyers for my book, which are in my suitcase, so I can't impose them on you. But one of the things to say in there is going into any new e-learning situation is to realize that people are at different levels of preparation for this. So we're back to the idea of communication, and you happen to be in a communication college. about addressing the audience. So I think I think we, as academics, and even in the field, because we don't quite know what we are, and everybody tells a different story, we haven't had the time to think about tailoring what we say to different audiences. So really putting out brochures that say, take this, this is what we mean, this is what we are, but in a way that makes sense. So I think it's a lot of advertising, marketing, and this, I mean, it's not going to hit the field, but that's how you're going to get the information, get people knowing what it is you're doing. And it means being at the table. Many, many years ago, and I'm in academia because I hit my head against the glass ceiling in computing. I was in a company that laid off every female manager. So being able to get beyond that point, it makes, now I've forgotten why I said that, but it's, being able to tailor the message and getting to see what the barriers are, to be able to get around those, I think is an important aspect. I did forget why I made that comment. Maybe it'll come back to me. Well, I can watch the tape later and then I can revise history and put in an explanation of that. But
I guess I don't want to, I know you've got to get going and all that, but one of the things that strikes me...
I have all the time in the world. You guys have to go, that's all.
Yeah, okay. One of the things that strikes me about this, who we are and getting people to understand who we are and why we're important.
Yeah. I know what it is.
I come back to the, it's the old adage, if you have to ask someone to tell you that they really love you,
Yeah,
okay,
no.
that
So-
doesn't work.
So I remember the point of it. The very first Elise conference I went to, of all things, there was, and it inspired me because there was a woman who was head of the nursing faculty, and she gave this talk on how she had changed her school around from being a failure. People were failing the exams, they were not getting through, and she said, I am going to be at every meeting, and she made a substantial change so that they were now at 95, 99% graduation rate. And she said, I'm going to be on every policy board in the university. I'm going to be at every meeting. I'm going to be in front of them all the time. And I think that kind of activism stance is what's needed. I mean, it's the yin and yang of life. You know, we've been quiet. We got to be noisy. So I think that's for me to see how to get past that barrier. And her example from many years ago it still resonates with me, as you can see.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's not, bitching about it is not going to solve the problem, as opposed to getting in there and trying to do some of this education on a one-to-one or a committee-to-one.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's easy or going to be done overnight, but yeah.
Building a little bit off your fast and slow point and off of Chuck's point, I also think, though, that the slow of it is having a coherent message, right?
Yes.
You can get yourself on every committee and in front of every camera you can find, but if you don't have a coherent message.
Yes, but you don't have to have an answer. You can say, what we do is we innovate, we're new, we are agile, we design, we reconceptualize the space. That's a coherent message. You don't have to say, what we do is provide information services to the community. So again, it's changing, not the question, but it's changing what it is you think is a coherent message. I mean, we must innovate. We must be innovative. We have to be moving forward at a fast pace, but that means that I'm agreeing with you. We have to have a consistent message, which how many years has it taken us to get to the point where we're willing to say what we do is innovate? So I'm agreeing with your point, but putting a little twist on it.
Well, what defines coherent, right?
Yeah. And I agree. You need a solid message. Yeah.
I want to go back to your making as an information scientist, administrator, teacher, researcher. I know seduced by research. So as an administrator of an iSchool, how do you create a sense of proportion for those components?
For the components of
Teacher, researcher, all the other duties as may be required.
as a director, had to decide what the new balance was. And I made the choice that I wouldn't keep the teaching. But I will still keep the research, because in my particular unit it's very, very important. And I think that would probably always be my choice, because that's me. So for me personally, balancing it out, you can't do everything. You have to give time to the director's job, absolutely. And therefore, what are you gonna change? What are you gonna shift over? There's still, unfortunately, you haven't fixed this yet. There's still only 24 hours a day, and there's only 7 days in a week. Somebody's got to work on that one, because I want a day off. The other thing is we were talking a little bit this morning about aligning these things so that they're not research, teaching, service, directorship. They're not separate. They're all somehow mixed. So you can see this is what I love. This is what I love. And when I took the director position at UBC, the reason I was looking for one is because I think the interesting questions are where the field is going. So for me, I'm constantly engaged in the question of where the field's going, the question of how to communicate it, the question of why aren't people understanding it, and I've been learning more of the advocating. Fundraising I have yet to learn, but where I am, I don't do that. It's up a layer above me, so it's not a day-to-day concern. But this is still the same. How do you get the message out there? How do you talk to people about what it is you do? So for me as a director, I've gone from, again, trying to write the academic paper to trying to write the communication paper, to write the to speak and to media without dumping 20 years of research on them in half an hour, and they go, oh. I did that. Somebody called me about e-learning, and I said, at the end she said, oh, I think I'll have to read some more. But now I know, I took my media training, 3 points. So as a director, I'm learning that. I think that's something that actually we should all know more of. We now are having come in and do media training for more of my faculty as well. I have a colleague at another university who has somebody who basically spends all his time teaching him how to do that and doing that outreach for him.
So I'm wondering how you would cope with a university environment that asks for 140% of your time to deal with administrative baloney.
They all ask for that. They all ask for that. You've only got 724. You have to choose. And is there any untenured faculty who's not working 724? I mean, you just have to say, okay, this one's high and this one's low. This one I'm doing, this one I'm not. I think.
Do you think the faculty can provide some direction of what they think is important?
Absolutely, I think the faculty has to. As I say, this is not something you do on your own as far as the direction goes. I think faculty can also help on saying, okay, you know what, there's this wonderful opportunity. It's in sync with my research, teaching, and service. I want to do it. How can you help me? And if I can't find some way to help them, then then why are we here? But I think if somebody says, oh, I got this great idea, somebody said it would, I want to know how it ties to research, teaching, and service. I want to know how it makes their life coherent. I want to know how it makes their resume look coherent. I want to know how it's going to make me famous. And I tell my faculty, you have to make me famous. And if they are doing stuff that's just going to waste their time, then that's not good. So there's a lot, I think, in focusing each person for their own potential. So they don't waste time. I think people do waste a lot of, not waste, overspend in non-productive ways. I think if you have, particularly in the online world, and I know this, I mean, you can be inundated with messages. At a certain point, most e-learning environments have learned to say, okay, you can't handle every message. You get 5,000 messages, and you should not be handling them. It has to be handed back to the learners to do something. So the question then is, how much are you taking on because you like to have control of everything, and how much should you stop doing that? So I think work management, we won't even talk about work-life management. It's an oxymoron, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, I really think that you have to look at what people are doing and sit down sensibly and say, 5 streams of research? No, not practical. You can have 3 tops, and I really don't want more than 2. And you're going to do them in serial way. Before at UBC, I was a mentor to one of the junior faculty, and she'll come to me with this list of 20 things she was going to do over the summer, and I'm going, okay, now really, if you've got 20 things going, you will finish none, really finish none. So put a timeline on these things. And actually, I did it for myself in about my 2nd or 3rd year, and I thought there would be 6 things. 6, I wasn't as bad as 20. And I put the times together, and it was like about a year. I said, okay, so what's the A task, B task? I mean, there's a lot of management. The funny thing is that I know a lot about management from my years in computing, because I was a application development manager. So being able to prioritize tasks and say, what's an A task, B task, C task? You never do the C's. Now, let's hope that C isn't your students, or me, or the director, or the dean, but you got to know your A tasks. So there's
But it may be equally as important to tell the dean, this is not an A task.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And if you can't
Not
have
this
that,
dean.
right? Not this dean. Right, right.
Task right now is to get Caroline to lie.
Ah,